Scottish public transport has a long and difficult history. From the struggles of establishing stagecoaches in the 17th and 18th centuries to the difficulties of access in the 21st century, public transport has long given freedom of movement to residents. However, with the price increases seen over the last decade, public transport is becoming more and more difficult to access. While much has been done to make public transport more accessible, the fare, frequency, and reliability of buses and trains continues to allow cars to dominate Scottish roads. The history of public transport is long and varied, from the stagecoaches of the 17th and 18th centuries to the development of the rail network in the 19th century. The development of public transport has been long and difficult, often leaving rural areas underdeveloped while urban areas thrive. The first attempt at bringing public transport to Scotland was the establishment of a stagecoach service between Glasgow and Edinburgh in 1678. The magistrates of Glasgow entered into an agreement with William Hume, an Edinburgh merchant, where he would have in readiness "ane sufficient strong coach to be drawn by 6 able horses to leave Edinburgh out Monday morning and return again, God willing, out Saturday night." The fare for this service was steep, at £4 16 Scots in the summer and £5 8 Scots in the winter. The intercity stagecoach was contracted for 5 years and did not last any longer than that. In 1713, the extent of Scotland's stagecoaches was two stagecoaches running between Edinburgh and Leith, and a monthly coach running between Edinburgh and London, a journey that took between 12 and 16 days. After the collapsing of Hume's stagecoach service, there was no regular service between cities until the service was re-established in the 1750s. In 1790, when stagecoaches were replaced by chassis drawn by two horses, these chassis reduced travelling time. Until the advent of the railways in the 1830s, the number of stagecoaches making the daily run between Glasgow and Edinburgh increased to 12. However, it would take 122 years from the first attempt at a stagecoach between Glasgow and Edinburgh for public transport to be attempted in the Highlands. In 1800, an attempt was made to establish stagecoaches running between Inverness and Perth and Inverness to Aberdeen. However, both routes failed due to the state of the roads in the area. In 1803, the Parliamentary Commissioners began the works that were to open up the Highland. The Inverness to Perth stagecoach service was introduced in 1806, and the Inverness Aberdeen route introduced in 1811. Eventually, an Oban to Inverness stagecoach was introduced in the 1830s, resulting in an increase of vessels on the Crinan Canal. Furthermore, the increase of stagecoach services throughout the Highlands led to an increase in passengers using the Caledonian Canal and an increase in steamships travelling to the Western Isles. The introduction of the stagecoach to the Highlands also led to the introduction of a new establishment in the area, the inn. The horse-drawn transport of the Highlands was not to be short-lived like it was in the Lowlands, as the Highlands, like the American West, would continue to use the coach on all minor arteries that would not see rail tracks for quite some time. Scotland's national railways have a long and proud heritage, from the first rail line, the Kilmarnock and Troon Railway, to the suburban rail lines of the 20th century, to the renationalisation of ScotRail in 2022. However, when Victoria came to the throne in 1837, very few railway lines had been opened in Scotland, and those that were operating were mainly for the benefit of industry, running between Glasgow, Dundee, and Edinburgh. By the turn of the 20th century, nearly all of Scotland's railways had been built, linking most major towns and many small villages, stretching from the Borders in the south to Thurso on the north coast, and operating many lines which are now shut and deemed unprofitable. Journeys had taken days prior to Victoria's reign, and were now completed in a matter of hours. In 1842, the Glasgow and Edinburgh line opened, and the popularity of the railways was becoming something of a sensation. In an attempt to compete with the Caledonian Company's dominance north of the River Tay, the North British Company made plans to open an east coast route by bridging both the Tay and the Forth, and that started some of the biggest engineering projects in the world at the time. For many years, the railways ran independently before being nationalised in 1947. However, less than 50 years later, the railways were privatised again in 1994 with the introduction of the Railways Act 1993. This privatisation of the railways led to many issues. One of the main issues many face when trying to use rail infrastructure is the lack of coverage and connection between areas. As an example, to get from Aberdeen to Fort William, Trainline sends passengers south to Glasgow who then get on another northbound train to Fort William. For many smaller stations, passengers have to travel to the next large station to get to their destination. In September 2025, peak rail fares were removed in Scotland. This was an obstacle to using the rail networks in Scotland, and while trains still can be expensive, the removal of peak fares has made significant changes to the affordability of rail travel in Scotland, with fare reductions being up to 48% on some journeys. However, rail service, much like bus service, for many, it can still be cheaper to drive and there is often not much of a difference in the time it would take between public and private transport. Buses face the same issue with fares. They are often ridiculously priced, making it cheaper to drive to your destination. For example, in Stirling, a small city in the Central Belt, a return ticket on the 54 route from Bridgevallon to the city centre was £2.40 for an adult in the mid 2010s. A return ticket on this route has now been discontinued, and the same journey from Bridgevallon to the city centre and back would be £6.25 for an adult. This issue with fares is further exacerbated in rural areas, as Appeal09 on Reddit argues, stating, "We've been fighting this fight in rural Fife for years. I'm a community councillor, and just laugh when Fife Council bleat on about people using the buses more to save the environment. The buses are ludicrously expensive, few and far between, and cancelled at the last minute. Unless you are under 22 or entitled to reduced travel, you need a mortgage to afford a bus service." Furthermore, while single fares are capped in England, they aren't in Scotland. A single fare in England is capped at £3. In Aberdeen, a single bus journey can cost as much as £3.35, while a return trip is capped at £5.25 and further journeys are capped at £5.55. This leaves many less financially well-off residents struggling to use public transport. Fares are just one of the many issues facing bus services within cities. Bus services are often unreliable, making it near impossible to use buses to commute. They are often 5 to 10 minutes late or cancelled at the last minute. Therefore, for many, driving is still more reliable and cheaper than using the bus, leaving cities congested, difficult to navigate, and full of car parks. While the National Entitlement Card scheme has opened doors for young people, many adults are excluded from using buses due to a lack of reliability and being priced out by fare increases since COVID. In conclusion, despite a long history of public transport in Scotland, issues faced by the services in recent years have left many who would make use of these services reliant on their cars. The lack of reliability leaves many workers driving to work when they live and work in areas that would be easily commutable on public transport if it was affordable and reliable. Despite the clear need for public transport to be more widely used, not only to help with congestion but also environmentally, the changes to people's travel habits will not come until the issues with pricing, reliability, and frequency are fixed. As Not Just Bikes, a YouTube channel focused on urban design and car dependency states, the only solution to car traffic is a viable alternative to driving. As such, until it is more convenient to take the bus or a train, people will continue to travel by car if they can drive.